Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
7th Street Productions, 31 Days of Halloween.
Greetings, Earthlings! Welcome back to 7th Street, and welcome to the very first episode of 7th Street Productions' 31 Days of Halloween, where we are counting down my top 31 favorite horror films of all time. Before we start this list, I would like to say that this was incredibly hard to do. Everybody knows what their top 5 is, and most people know what their top 10 favorite films are. It gets harder to figure out your top 20, and is a real head scratcher when you're trying to figure out 30, because once you get into the late 20s, you really gotta think about it, pretty hard, and then there's nothing harder than trying to figure out that last 31st film to put on the list. So, these first couple episodes, man, they took me forever to do, and I really had to move things around. But without further ado, I would like to announce my 31st favorite horror film of all time, and that is Candyman, based on a short story written by Clive Barker, starring the always phenomenal Tony Todd, who I actually had the pleasure of meeting at Crypticon Seattle one year. Basic plot is about this woman named Helen who is working on her thesis paper, which I believe it's for her master's degree in journalism. It's been a little while since I've seen the film, but anyway, the real point of that is she decides to disprove a popular urban legend that exists in sort of the really urban area of downtown Chicago, and that just so happens to be the legend of Candyman, which is basically Bloody Mary. If you say Candyman's name 3 times into a mirror, he will appear and, gut you like a fish. And Helen ends up being haunted by Candyman. This Tony Todd with this bloody hook hand is following her around everywhere. People keep turning up dead. The police think that it's her. And as the movie goes on, as a viewer, you're really confused as to whether or not she is going crazy or Candyman is real. And spoiler alert, it all just kind of comes to a head, and the climax of the film ends up being Helen is now the new urban legend in Chicago. It's a really interesting film. I remember the first time I ever heard about this film, for sure, because my older cousin, Cameron Bryson, he had seen the movie, and I remember him saying, "Oh man, it's so scary. There's this part where this, little boy gets his wiener cut off in a bathroom, and he's on the ground, and he's crying for his mom, holding his bloody wiener," and I remember thinking, holy shit, that must be the most disturbing movie ever made. And it sort of is. It's a beautiful film, a beautiful score by Philip Glass, and it might be Kronos Quartet? I don't know. I've always been sort of confused. Maybe someone in the comments can answer that for me. I always kind of associated Philip Glass and the Kronos Quartet as the same thing. I'm sure they're not. I'm sure you guys can answer that for me. But yeah, I would definitely classify this one as, it's a recommendation. I don't know if I would go as far to say that this is a must-watch, because I don't think that it's for everybody. I think that this film may be a little bit slow by today's standards, and I think that certain gore hounds might be a little bit turned off by the movie in certain ways, because it's far and few in between the big special effects sequences. But I think that there is probably something that most people would appreciate about this film. Tony Todd is always great. Clive Barker stories are always fucked up. You kind of can't go wrong with this movie.